Hi. Danny Fleming.
And Marcus Collins from MA Properties.
Yes.
It's a while since we've done this, is why we're kind of, who's going first? That's why we were in this. So this evening we're going to talk about the
Arlington Market Review of 2022. What a year it was. We all have heard all of the doom and gloom headlines and things like this around the country, but it's really important to understand that real estate is local. It's local. You've got to get information and data today and make sense of how it translates to the market that you're in, because what's happening in Nashville isn't what's happening here. What's happening in San Diego isn't what's happening here. This is what's happening here. So we're going to go through this. So we want to try and make sense of it for you. And this is the reason that we take the time to explain and why we're serious about learning every data point and detail. And obsessive about our markets?
Yeah, a little bit.
Pretty obsessive about our markets.
A little bit, yes.
But this is something that you can do independently yourself as well, because you can find this information all on our website. If you go onto our website, maproperties.com, scroll down to the statistics button, then you'll come and find all sorts of data points, graphs. I mean, what you're seeing at the moment is 6. I think there's something like 18 or something
3 times that, I think.
Of different data elements on our website. And each of them has Arlington info and about 50 other different towns as well. So lots of stuff out there. Now, if you live in Arlington, you've probably used to getting the market review that we generate each year. It hits mailboxes by about late January,
early February.
Yeah. Marcus is working on this right now. Yes.
Right now.
So as soon as it's finished, it gets to the printers, it's going to be in your mailbox. Although we did send out something just yesterday, I think, of the 2022 home sales that happened in Arlington. So that's in your mailbox, and it's also on our website as well. So let's get into this. Well, what's the agenda for today? First, Marcus is going to cover most of this, but I'm going to chime in every so often.
You're not going to sit there like a string. My wife is no swinging violet. So
Yeah, well,
be under no illusions, it will not just be the Marcus show.
but he's only just finished the presentation about 5 minutes ago, so I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I do know what's been happening from an on-the-ground perspective. He's going to cover single-family homes, then the new construction market, condominiums, an analysis of what's going on, and then 2023 predictions. As tough as that's going to be.
Yes, that will be a hard one, that will be. So let's kind of jump right into it and see exactly what happened in the single-family home market in 2022. I'm going to get totally confused with 2022
I will point out
and
when
2023.
I will point out when you're wrong.
Normally what I mean is 2022 in the first half, and then the second half will be 2022. So let's take a look. First thing to look at is the number of home sales. So the graph you're looking at here, this part of the presentation, and the market review as well, actually. Chock-a-block with graphs. There's a lot more written analysis in the market review. You're getting that as a talk track today. But jam-packed full of these kind of graphs. So what you're seeing here is the number of home sales for the last decade. So we always show the last 10 years. Blue is existing homes. Green is the new construction homes. And then there's kind of slither, it's not very much in Arlington, but that slither of orange colour is the off-market teardowns, which are those homes which never actually come on the market. They're sold directly to builders, and then guess what? They're converted into new construction homes. There isn't that much variability, even throughout COVID, in terms of the number of homes that have sold. That's not true of all towns, that's for sure. There are some towns that saw a wide variation, specifically during COVID. Arlington didn't see very much. A little bit of a bump last year in 2021. You can see 293 existing homes. But we've really come back to business as usual. And if you kind of compare the 2 years, 2022 with 2021, you can see it's kind of just there or thereabouts. So there's no big difference. A slight reduction in the number of homes that sold. This is the number of homes that went under agreement, and you can see they're almost exactly the same. So business as usual, really, in terms of the number of home sales. Let's take a look at a couple of metrics now, which will give us a sense of the strength of the market. First one to look at is days on the market. Pretty straightforward. How long did a home take to sell? It dropped in 2021, and it's kept at that very low level, 15 in 2021, and it rose a little bit, but nothing to worry about here. It dropped to 17 in 2022, so a very low number.
What's interesting to point out, though, is that the pre-COVID years of 2019, for instance, quite high days on the market. So from COVID onwards, the days on the market is dropping quite.
It's dropped.
Yep.
And Danny said high. In comparison to other towns, it's not so high.
Yeah,
Arlington, as you'll see in a minute, is a very strong town. But yeah, certainly higher than we saw over the last couple of years. Now, the other metric we like to look at is the ratio of the sale price to the list price. Sale price, list price ratio.
And explain.
So if a home comes on the market for 700,000 and it sells for 700,000, that's 100% sale price to list price, and so on. If it sells for over 700, clearly it's over 100. Sells for less, it's less than 100. So as you can see here, it bounced around 102, 104%. And when we were giving these presentations in the past, we always said Arlington's a really strong town because it's got a ratio of over 100%. 2021 came along, and woof, all the way from 102 to 109% in 2021. And actually that ratio for the year as a whole was about the same in 2022. But there's a but here.
It's in most markets in Massachusetts or in this general area, it's really been a tale of two halves. The first half of 2022 and the last half of 2022. And you'll see that soon.
Right, you'll see this in a lot of the information we'll show. You know, as Danny said, and as you remember, the mortgage interest rates started to rise quite rapidly, and I'll show you that graph a little bit later on.
It rose. June.
Right, middle of the year, give or thereabouts, it started to rise, and it rose precipitously. It wasn't a gradual rise; it just went up and up and up, and that had a material impact on the market. The question is, what was the impact? And if you look at this data here, you would say, well, actually not very much. But let's break this down month by month. So what's that ratio for homes that closed in each of these months? And here's this information here. So relatively low in January, no surprise, not many homes sell in January. And then it rose quite dramatically up to 114, 117% in that early half of the year, or first half of the year. Then look what happened in the second half of the year. It dropped, if that's the right word, all the way down to 100. In fact, it dropped below 100% in November. And this is back to what Danny was saying in terms of that tale of two halves. There was the early part of the year where we saw a dramatic rise or strength in the market. This is what this shows. I'll show you prices in a minute. But then that second half of the year, it dropped off, and it dropped off quite
and it's quite important. It's quite important to point out that when a home closes, for instance in July, it probably went under agreement in May or June. When a home closes in August, let's say 108%, it probably went under agreement in June. So you've got to give about a 2-month lag from what's being reported on there. For instance, in November, well, that was around September timeframe that, you know, there was so much there was so much uncertainty because the mortgage interest rates were continuing to climb. Right. People are saying, not really sure about buying in this market, that type of thing. So there's a 2-month lag. That's
true. Yeah, I picked the middle of the year just as kind of it's kind of a nice. It was around about when it was happening, and it kind of gives us a nice 6 months. 6 months. More homes sell in the first half of the year than the second half of the year, but. If you move it any further towards the end of the year, then what, of course, you end up doing is you end up with very few sales, which it didn't make sense to do. But clearly, there's a difference there. It's not a gradual drop. It dropped from 117 and then all the way down to 103, 100, 199. So clearly a major drop there, driven by the mortgage interest rates because it's kind of around about when that happened.
And the fear of the buyers with mortgage interest rates. It's
there you are.
Just where are they going? That type of thing.
So prices. What's going on with prices? So here is the decade worth of prices, and as you can see, it's been rising rapidly both in 2021 and 2022. A somewhat dramatic rise. In fact, let me look at my cheat sheet here. It rose about 16% this year. But again, let's think about that kind of tale of two halves. Let's break out 2022 into the first half and the second half, which is what I've done here. It's kind of a slightly more transparent blue color. You can see a large rise. In fact, there was a 20% rise in average prices in the first half of 2022, but then it dropped about 7 to 8%, just over 7%, down to about 12% rise for the second half of 2022. Now,
which in real numbers is about 100K.
Right. Now, remember, even though it was a drop of about just over 7% between the first half and the second half, we still, during that second half of 22, we still managed a 12% rise over the average in 2021. So it dropped, but it didn't drop that much. And you can see that in the data there. That second half of 2022, it's still higher than you can see in 2021. Looking at other towns, that isn't always the case. But we do see this kind of first half, second half of 22 in many, many towns. We do see that kind of drop off. But overall, we've seen a very, very strong market here, even with the high increases in prices, but also the downturn in the market. For those of you who care about medians, here's the median price. I just did all the analysis on the average. You pay your money and take your pick. Here's the median, went from 950 in 2021 to 1.153 in 2022. Again, a relatively steep rise. So clearly a very, very strong market.
When you compare the change in median from, say, 2018 to 2019, it really didn't go up much. So, the pandemic years really did increase prices quite dramatically, which is, it makes sense because people were migrating from all over the country, migrating to different areas because of family, lifestyle choices, weather, jobs, you can work from home, all of those types of things really did change our markets quite dramatically.
And I think the big picture here, if you like, for the average price in Arlington is, to what extent is Arlington's changing? If you think about, you pick the median, back in 2017, 18, 19, it was basically in the 750, 800 mark. And now we're at almost 1.1, 1.15. That's a dramatic increase in prices. Add to that, of course, the dramatic increase in mortgage interest rates, and all of a sudden the monthly payments become considerably larger. There's two factors here: high price appreciation, high mortgage interest rates. And to what extent is that certainly not putting a dampener on the market? We saw about 6% less sales this in 2021 versus 2020, which is nothing really. But it hasn't put that much of a damper on the market. But to what extent is the people moving into the town different from perhaps what they were 3 to 4 years ago? And that's kind of a question, something to watch over the next few years as those traditional first-time home buyers, potentially 1.15, 1.2 million, is a little bit out of their price range now. And will that change the demographics, if you like, of Arlington in terms of it being a destination for first-time home buyers? Having said that, it really hasn't had much of an impact on...
No, and this is single-family homes too.
Correct.
So, the first-time home buyers still have the opportunity with condos.
Yep, and we'll cover those in a minute. Now, given this high price, we thought it worthwhile looking at what's happening with new construction, because in general, new construction is much more expensive than existing homes. If you think about the average home in Arlington, it's probably built in the 1940s, maybe even 1930s, whereas new construction clearly is 2023 construction. So it's selling for a much higher price. So turning our attention a little bit to new construction, to just see to what extent the number of new construction homes being built is skewing that average to a higher price point. And you'll see some of that coming in here as well. So here's the number of new construction homes in Arlington. Fluctuates quite a lot. Back until about 2015, nobody ever built new construction in Arlington, essentially. Then it kind of was in that 27, 26 price range, dropped in 2021, beginning to pick up again now in 2022. So small in comparison to the market as a whole, of course, but still the price point they're coming on the market at is having that impact on prices. And you can see that with the sale price distribution for these new construction homes. This is the last 4 years distribution. Back in 2019, the majority of new construction homes were in the 1 to 1.5 million price range. Today, they're in the 1.5 to 2, but guess what? There are even more in the 2 to 2.5 million. And so that new homes being built at those higher prices is beginning to pull up, if you like, that average and the median in terms of that price. So having some impact on price, but not that much of an extent. Certainly not enough to explain the kind of 12-16% rise we're seeing in prices, but it's having some impact on that, which is why I wanted to show a little bit about new construction and to show that today homes, 10 homes in fact, are between 2 and 2.5 million sold in Arlington, which no more than 3 to 4 years ago would not have been the case. So it very much can command those high prices, and that will inevitably bring developers into the town knowing that they can get these high prices for their homes. So something to watch in terms of the number of new construction homes rising as average price of new construction homes increases.
And the number of developers coming in and trying to buy off-market teardowns. I did notice that, I believe it was 2017, there was a dramatic increase in number of teardowns, which relates to when those homes were being built, why there was such a large number. And you know, it's always a cautionary tale that a lot of folks think that when a developer knocks on their door and offers them money as an off-market sale, a lot of folks don't realize you can actually get more money. Typically, 95% of the time, you'll get more money bringing your home on the market to a home buyer rather than a developer. But
yeah, and I think that 95 may be on the low side, given what we saw, what 16% rise in price in average prices in Arlington this year, and that's at all price points. It's clearly a very, very popular town at whatever price point buyers can get into.
And this is something that, just a plug for something else that we do. We do sellers masterclasses, and we go into showing folks, it's all about education and talking about why teardowns you're not going to get the highest price for your home as a teardown.
Absolutely. And I think we'll see that increase. We'll see the pressure of teardowns increase. We may even see the number of teardowns increase. But, looking at the average price increases, say 95% are not, maybe even higher than that, given what we've seen. So that's new construction. Let's have a quick look at condominiums. And maybe not a quick look. Let's have a look at condominiums. Here's the condominium sales. Fluctuates a little bit. We saw a large number of condo sales back in 2021, 286 existing homes. That reduced slightly, reduced a lot actually, down to 211, if I can see those numbers there, 211 this year. It does vary a little bit, as you can see in the decade worth of data. So we definitely did see a decrease in the number of condominium sales in 2022 versus 2021. Back to those key metrics we like to look at. Here's that sale price to list price ratio. It's considerably lower and has been for a while than single family. Single family has always been somewhat stronger. Condominiums had the added benefit of the price, of course, being lower, and that brought more buyers in. But they've always been performed slightly lower than the single family market, and it dropped to 102%. But again, let's look at this.
Tale of two halves.
There you go. And you can see it dramatically here. I was quite surprised when I saw this information, this data. It's quite high, it's 106, 107, and then back. It's almost like a light switch went on, and it dropped right down to actually below 100% in the second half of the year.
Well, typically, because your first-time home buyer is more impacted, they're borrowing more for the home that they're buying. even just a 1% increase in mortgage interest rates is going to dramatically impact them, and that's absolutely seen in these graphs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think, if you look at almost any town that is affordable, I'll use that as an example because the average price in Arlington is about 700,000
For condos.
For condos,
Yep.
Any affordable town is going to see a similar impact. This kind of drop off in the second half of the year as those first-time home buyers, exactly as you say, Dan, you go all of a sudden, oh, hold on a minute, I can't actually afford it anymore. I was struggling to be able to buy that 1-2 bedroom condominium in Arlington. Now actually interest rates have risen by 2-3%. I can't afford them at all.
I'll stay in my rental until things get better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually in the market review, we give an analysis of the rental market. I didn't want to do it this evening. It kind of doesn't really fit in this market, but in the market review, we'll take a look at the rental market as well. There it is. So average prices rose, as you can see, a rather substantial rise, but no surprise as we break that. We can
apart.
see. Right, and if I just get my numbers here for condominiums for Arlington, we saw about an 8% drop in the second half of the year in terms of the average price. And so first half of the year was up about 16%. All told, we're at about 12% for the year. Still higher, but nowhere near as high as we were in that early part of the year.
This is what we want to stress. It's different for every single town. It's really quite dramatic how different it is depending on the town that you're in and the price point of the town that you're in as well.
Yep. So. Real estate is local and is kind of an age-old statement, but it's absolutely the case. We've seen a decline here in Arlington, but overall, it's still gone from 16% to 12%.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in other parts of the country, it may have gone from
Nashville
10% to negative 10%. And so you're right, everything is very much local to the market. And the market dynamics in Arlington are different from they are in Lexington or Winchester or Waltham or Burlington. The market dynamics really dictate, and that specifically here in Massachusetts, school systems and so on, is all based around the town. And that's why you see a wide discrepancy between towns that are essentially adjacent to one another.
And this is part of the challenge when the doom and gloom headlines come out that are national. People really worry without looking deeper at what's going on in my town or the town that I want to buy, because it's not necessarily the case at all of the doom and gloom headlines. So,
right.
And this is exactly
there it is. There you
it's
can
not
see
the
it
doom
there.
and gloom.
Right.
I mean, sure, the second half of the year wasn't as good as the first half of the year, but it's still fantastic.
Right, 12% is pretty good, let's face it. Yes, certainly 12% is better than you get in the stock market, right, for that same period of time, it's fair to say. So, that's condominiums. So, kind of put some wider perspective here in terms of, what's happening to the market. Last couple of years, many people who've watched the presentation we've given have seen this slide before. Really, changing housing demands drove the market. That's now declining. COVID is still a thing, but it's clearly nowhere near as much as it was, the last 1 to 2 to 3 years ago. So this changing housing demands beginning to not be a dominant factor in terms of the housing market. We're returning to the good old days, if you will. 2017, 18, 19, where it's really that change of dynamics, demographics, which is changing the housing market. And what this graph here shows you is the number of people in each different age bracket. That top yellow bar are the downsizers, baby boomers born just after World War II. They're now thinking of retiring and therefore downsizing. The lower bracket is the first-time home buyers, the millennials. And if you think about the Arlington market, back to the dynamics in Arlington are different from other towns, both of those groups see Arlington as a great destination. And that's what's driving the market and will continue to drive the market as we think about 2023 and 24 and moving forward. This is what's going to drive the market, is the change in demographics, no longer the changing housing requirements because of COVID.
And actually, it's interesting because when you sort of say what's driving the market at the moment, and it's not necessarily COVID anymore. I went to visit someone today, and Proposition 1 is what's driving them to move out of the state.
You got taxes.
It's quite interesting.
There we go. Taxes, yes, unfortunately, yes. It's back to that. There's somebody who's looking now to downsize. In this case, not to downsize into Massachusetts, but to downsize outside of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But that's a sell. That's a sell in Massachusetts and a buy somewhere else, New Hampshire or Florida or wherever it may be.
Yeah.
So this is what's going to drive the market moving forward, and will continue to drive it. The challenge will be, I think, the first-time home buyers, and we saw it very much with the condominium market, they're beginning to get priced out of the market. Prices have risen. Interest rates have risen, and I'll just show you those right now. And that's beginning to price them out of the market. And you can see that decline in terms of that sell price to price ratio for the second half of the year. This is mortgage interest rates, the last, actually it's since 2000. The orange color is 30-year fixed and the blue is the ARM. Doesn't make any difference. As you can see, if I can use my magic, there we go. That dramatic rise there from about the middle of 2021 is what you saw shown up in the metrics that we just showed you. It's that dramatic rise there.
And what I think is important to sort of point out with that, when you look at the 5/1 ARM rates, they're significantly less than the 30-year fixed. But what we found with buyers over the last decade have had really, really low interest rates. So why even think about a 5/1 ARM? That they just weren't even in people's wheelhouse. They weren't even thinking of them. And now we need people to think about them because that is a far better, lower interest rate. So maybe people should start thinking about 5/1 ARMs again.
I think undoubtedly people are.
And then refinance in 5 years' time.
And speaking of refinance, let's take a look at what the predictions are.
Yeah.
So this is here, the blue graph, this is the mortgage interest rates. The blue graph is year by year, except I left 2022 quarterly. And just to show you, if I can kind of highlight it here, show you the rise we saw in interest rates in 2022. The growling behind us, by the way, is the dog.
It's our dog.
The dog is on the carpet having a whale of a time. The green are the predictions. He's coming to say hello now. The green are the predictions. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we've been following this for a long time, and they've not been very good about predicting interest rates. But I thought it was worthwhile to show you. Here's the predictions through 2024, which is pretty brave in my estimation. You can see that interest rates are set to decline over the next 1 to 2 years. And just as you were saying, maybe now is the time to jump into an ARM, because it's likely when the ARM resets in 5 years, interest rates will be lower. Or if interest rates do get down to those heady numbers of 2.5%, it's a chance to actually move into a 30-year fixed.
Yeah.
So I think ARM it does make sense today, just because all the predictions, this is the Mortgage Banker Association forecast here, does have interest rates declining over the next few years.
But I think it's all about the agents that people are working with need to remind people that those options are there. I know I was helping some sellers and they were buying down in Florida, and they were right when this was happening, and they were talking about the fact that they had to cancel their buy. They needed to get out of it because they just couldn't afford the mortgage anymore, and they hadn't even thought about an ARM because it just wasn't something that anyone's had to think about for many years because of such low interest rates that we normally had.
Right. It's strange to me. I'm from Europe, Danny's from Australia. There is no such thing as the 30-year fixed in Europe, let alone the UK. It is all not only a 5/1 ARM, it's a variable rate mortgage. So it changes month by month. And so 5/1 seemed like a good idea. 30-year fixed didn't make any sense to me, but my head is in that ARM world because that's where I grew up. So it's surprising.
I don't remember what it was like in Australia, but I don't think it had fixed rates. No.
Yeah, no, there's no such thing. So that's kind of the underlying trend that we see of declining mortgage interest rates over the course of this year and into next year. So, lots of discussion. Danny mentioned that he's just disappeared. The dog just disappeared. So the growling will stop as the dog just disappeared. Back to that notion of what you were talking about of everything's real estate is local. Has there been a housing bubble here? Doesn't look like it. I mean, we've definitely seen a decline in that second half of 2022, but still overall for the year, it's higher. So in fact, in terms of single family in Arlington, it's still higher based on the second half of 2022. So clearly not a housing bubble in terms of a dramatic reduction in the number of prices. But I wanted to kind of throw this in there just to say, well, maybe this isn't quite what's happening with us. Other parts of the country, different story, of course, but really nothing on this scale for us.
Yeah, we have to be very, very careful because when people talk about housing bubbles, there are so many different factors that were associated with the last housing bubble that just don't come into play now.
Right.
They just don't come into play. So, part of this is attention-grabbing headlines, perhaps.
Reality in different parts of the country, perhaps.
Yeah.
But certainly not in the Arlington market, that's for sure. So, crystal ball. So by the way, we've not actually rehearsed this. We have no idea. Who's going first?
Well, part of the thing too is that you'll find analysts all over the country. Half are saying prices are going to go down. Half are saying everything's going to be fine. Nobody has a good handle on what's going on at the moment. I would think the appreciation rate in Arlington is going to drop a little, but prices are not going to go down. It's going to stabilize a little, which, to be honest, it's some of the prices people were paying was insanity, really. They were people have paid a lot of money sometimes, and it's going to take a few years for them to be able to at least sell the homes for those sorts of prices that they've paid. But I don't believe prices are going to go down. They're going to stabilize, appreciation rate not be the same heady figures that it has been before, because really when you come to it, Arlington is still a really desirable town. It's got really strong fundamentals. The school system is great. It's close to Boston. Everything is a rosy picture in Arlington. So prices, it's still going to be in demand.
Okay.
What do you think?
What do I think? So I'm going to break it single family and condominiums.
Yeah.
I'm going to break it up that way, I think.
Yep.
Single family, we've not seen an appreciable rise in the number of home sales and therefore decline in the number of home sales in 2022 or 21. So it's around about the same number of home sales that we've seen previously. If sellers begin to understand that, yes, there was a little bit of a slowdown in the second half of 22, but look at prices, they are still considerably higher than they were previously. There's no damper for sellers putting their homes on the market. A declining price, potentially sellers will think, oh, maybe I'll wait 2 to 3 years. Maybe I'll stay where I am. But there doesn't seem to be, looking at the data, there's no reason why now is not a good time to put your home on the market in Arlington as a seller.
But there is a challenge because a lot of people look at the doom and gloom headlines
without
realizing that it doesn't apply here.
The reality is, though,
doesn't apply.
Right,
it's different.
No, right. The reality is, if you look at the data, you look at the presentation, look at the data. Don't need to listen to what I say. Just look at the graphs. It is clear that house prices rose even in the second half of 2022. And so there's no impediment to sellers except what they're reading in the Washington Post or the New York Times about the housing market in California to putting their homes on the market. In the single family market, there doesn't seem to be an impediment to buyers buying either. Didn't have that much of an impact. We still saw a strong second half of the year. Not as strong as the first, those kind of heady days, are gone. Average of 117% sell price to list price ratio. I think they're fair to say those days are gone. They will not continue into 2023. But even with the high price increases we've seen previously and high mortgage rates, which should decline over the next 1 to 2 years, there's still a large number of buyers buying in the market. Yep. So I think single family will be
okay.
Yeah, I think appreciation, absolutely, as you said, will not be at the numbers we've seen previously. That's for sure. Even if we carry on at second half of 2022 numbers, it's a moderate increase, certainly higher than most towns around. To put that in perspective, Lexington, for example, saw an average of 3% rise in prices. So we're going to see a much higher rise in Arlington, but clearly not the kind of double digits that we've seen previously. Condominiums is a different story. Looking at the second half of the year, clearly the condo market didn't quite grind to a halt, but it's pretty close. Condominiums were not selling at the prices. Now, what will that mean? Potentially that sellers of condominiums will stay where they are. So we'll see less condominiums come on the market. Potentially, until interest rates begin to sort themselves out at a much lower level, maybe the buyers will be a little bit reticent or can't afford. So I think we'll see a much slower condominium market than we will single family in 2023. Yep. So buoyant buoyant, not at the heady levels of 2021, but certainly for the second half of 2022, continuing in single family, and potentially a slowing down, maybe zero, maybe slight decline in condominium prices until interest rates begin to kind of pick up or go down, and therefore the market begins to pick up. And that certainly looks like, if anything, it's the end of 23, maybe into 24. So I think we're going to see a bumpy ride a little bit in the condo market, but clearly not that way in the single family market.
Yeah, I don't know so much of a bumpy market in the condo market.
Okay, there we go.
Steady,
we never agree on this.
Steady.
Okay. So there we go. That's for what it's worth. That's pretty good for a prediction on the 15th. I'll get the date, the 15th of January. We'll probably come back in February and go, so we got that wrong, didn't we? But hey, that's why we need to...
we need to fill people in on what we believe and what we're seeing and what we're talking to people and we're talking to buyers and all of this sort of stuff. Absolutely. We need to get this out there because information is key.
Yep.
All right.
So...
Thank you for coming.
Right, thank you for listening. The market review, the paper version with lots of these graphs with some written analysis instead of talking analysis. Maybe that's better. I don't know. I think the talk is easier than writing. I'm going to show you. We'll be in the mailboxes hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Lots of information in there. Looks at the rental market as well. Yep. So look out for that.
And if you've got any questions about anything, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to talk because we like talking real estate.
We do. As you can see, we like talking real estate. And we have lots to talk about. I mean, it's been an interesting year. It's it's not like it's been a rather boring year with a 2% rise in interest in prices. It's been a very interesting year. So,
and we keep our finger on the pulse as to what's going on so we can fill you in
month by month.
Yep.
Okay, look.
With our market updates.
Indeed, there we are.
All right. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.